Hello and welcome to Auto-Trol Technologies Tech Illustrator Release 14.0 update video. Let's take a look at the highlights of this new release. We have the addition of item-specific control points. We've added a new line grid to orthographic, axonometric, and perspective toolsets. We've added grid snap interval to axonometric and perspective toolsets. And new crosshatch items include attribute and boundary editing. Export raster is now an option under the File menu. Item fill and boundary area fill have been added to toolbars. And with this release, we've added visualization tools in Dynamic Shader and Dynamic HLR visualization toggles, and we've added Z-buffer for more accurate display of 3D items. Users have the ability to modify system shortcut keys now, and you can automatically activate point control based on cursor position. We have an Autosave feature with a user set interval. Please note this replaces our Weezer recovery from previous versions. And we now have redo to go with our unlimited undo. Items now remain selected after attribute changes and ungroup operations. For our quick action writers out there, we've added modal list forms to the macro user interface. Third-party data formats can now be dragged and dropped into TI, and the status bar now has toggles for autoface and grid snap for easy access. For our converters, the Web CGM now has visibility and interactivity control both in the plugin and the converter. Font properties elements are now supported in the converter as well. Our PostScript converter now supports multi-page PostScript documents. What this means is you can take multiple DG files and bring them together into a multi-page PostScript document. This might be something that you then want to convert into a PDF document. Our DWG converter is now based on open DWG libraries, and the TIFF converter allows for conversion of color files to grayscale. Let's take a further look at all these new enhancements. Okay, we're going to start out by drawing an ellipse. And note, I do have my grid snap turned on. And then I'm going to select this ellipse, come to this grab handle, and hold down my Shift key. That allows me to create concentric ellipses. If you notice the plus sign by the cursor, that tells you this is a duplicate operation. If I go to the center point of the ellipse, hold down the Shift key, and drag, it makes a duplicate of that ellipse without changing the size. Next, we're going to come in and draw some tangent lines. And now, let's make a copy of this to create a bit of a flange. And we'll add the tangent lines to make it look correct. We need to relimit this ellipse, so we select it, come to the relimiting grab handle, and just drag it back to the location we want the arc to end at. The same thing with this elliptical arc. This ellipse is no longer needed, so we'll select it and get rid of it. And we'll shorten these lines by grabbing the end of them and just dragging them down to the grid point we want them at. Next, we're going to copy this ellipse, again using that Shift center grab handle. And we're going to relimit the bottom ellipse. Now I need to turn off my grid snap, and I'm going to turn on the threading tool, which is under the ellipse multi-button. I select my ellipse, click the first point to indicate the distance between the threads, and simply drag the cursor. Do the same thing down here at the bottom. And there are the threads. Finally, we're going to duplicate some of these lines. Again, there's the plus symbol telling you this is a duplicate operation. Okay, another thing we want to show is how the relimit works to restore items. So I'm going to duplicate this arc, and we're going to relimit this back to a full circle. So you select the item, and then you go to one of the relimit control points, and you hold the control key down, and just click on it, and it brings your full ellipse back. So here we are at the control point, click, and there it is. Let's show that again. So we'll relimit the ellipse back to a part, an arc. I hold the control key down, click on the grab handle, and there's the full ellipse. Okay, now I'm going to sketch in a rectangle. It's an axonometric rectangle. And you'll notice I've got my axonometric grid set, and I just want to show the grab handles on this rectangle. You can see we've got these item-specific grab handles for axonometric rectangles, and they follow the existing base angles of that rectangle. You can see you can adjust these along those base angles, and also notice that the grid snap is working. Okay, I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. And one of the things I want to show here is a cutaway. So let's pull this edge back. To there. And I'm going to relimit my ellipse. And I'm just going to get rid of this one side here with a little edit command. Next, I'm going to come in with the curved lines tool. I need to shut off my grid snap. And I'm going to start drawing my curved lines here to show that this is a cutaway. Then I'm going to show you how we can edit this curved line, how we can adjust it. Let's say we don't like the curve right there. We select the curved lines, and you can see the grab handles on the item, and with those you can adjust the smooth curve to fine-tune it. Make it look a little more like what you originally had in mind. Okay, and we can do the same thing with the one over here. We select it, and then just move to the grab points and adjust them to correct the spline, make it look like we want it to. Now we're going to select all these items, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key to duplicate all of them. There's that plus symbol by the crosshairs, and we've duplicated the item. We'll need to relimit the lower arc. Then we need to edit these other items. I'm just going to use a quick edit command to get rid of these two items. And we'll use F5 and F6 to real quickly draw on the line snapping to the corner points. Up here, I'm going to bring up my Trim and Edit Extend tools and trim between these two intersections to remove that line. Okay, so far we've shown ellipses, the relimit grab handles, the axonometric rectangle control points, and spline control points. Now I want to show you the closed polygons and how the control points work with those. For starters, I'm going to move our top item out of the way. There we go. And I want to get rid of this little line. And then we're going to mask this with a colored mask. While we're here, I want to show you how you can reconnect this line. I can use the grab handle to pull the line, and when I get close to this other endpoint, I can snap to it with an F5. That's a new feature for you. Now we're going to use a tool that's been added to the 3D construction toolbar called Create Planar Surface. I click on the button, and then I'll start clicking points around this item using a gray colored mask. Now in this area, I'm going to place my points away from the arc so that I can show you something here in a minute. And I'll finish my tracing over here and conclude with 2 returns. And notice when I click in the middle of a CPG, it selects the CPG and it highlights the whole mask. So I'll select it. Then I'm going to go to Item Edit, and I'm going to push the CPG to the back. Now when I select the item, you'll notice it just has the regular grab handles out here. But if I hold down the Control key and click on the middle grab handle, now the grab handles show up on all the points of the closed polygon. Because of that, I can come back in here and adjust these points to be closer to the arc where I really want them. Now to really make this look good, what I really need is more points. So I come to the middle of this line and I hit an F10, and it adds a new point there for me that I can then pull to the edge of the arc. And we'll add one here, and another one here, and fine-tune that. So that looks a lot better now. So remember that F10 for adding points to polygons. Alright, with our closed polygon boundary item, I want to add a hole to it. You can see I've already added an ellipse over here. I'm going to select the closed polygon, and again you can see that we've got the grab handles or the box points on the outside here. That's because our item has more than 20 vertices. I want to go to the center point, and I'll hold down the Control key and click, and then TI will give me the control points on all the vertices of the item. There we go. Now if I come back to the center point, to the point where I have the hand on the cursor, and I hit an F10, a subboundary is created for this polygon. If I pull the subboundary away from the closed polygon, it's still part of the CPG. You can tell that because it's still highlighted as part of the CPG. When I pull the subboundary back into the closed polygon, it becomes a hole in the closed polygon. Let's zoom in here, and I'm going to move this into place. I'm going to take this now, and I'm going to adjust it and resize it using the grab handles to make the hole fit the shape I have on the part. Okay, that looks good enough, but we've got these two extra control points here. By hovering over them and hitting the F11 key, I can delete those points. Now this looks pretty good. Note that the sub-boundary can be moved, and it can also be duplicated. If I hover over the center and hit the F10 key, a duplicate is made. There's the move. And now I'll hover and hit the F10 key, and after I move the cursor, you see the duplicate. We're going to move the sub-boundary over here, and we'll select the rest of the items and duplicate them. There we go. Alright, now what I want to show is duplicating and moving the hole again, and then we're going to show how to delete the hole. So to start out, I'm just going to select this geometry and duplicate it up here using my grid snap to locate it. Okay, now I want to turn my grid snap off, and I'm going to come back and select my closed polygon. And again, for duplicating, you go to the center and hit F10, and it makes a duplication of it. And then you can move it into place. Now I could have just showed moving the entire hole rather than duplicating it, but I wanted to show how you delete a hole also. So now we'll come back to this one, select and delete the geometry. Then we select the closed polygon, hover over the center of it, and hit F11. After doing that, once you move your cursor, then the hole will be deleted. Alright, now I want to talk a little bit about the grids. We're going to go into our axonometric properties and show that there is a new grid type called line. There it is. We come up and activate the grid, and we're going to turn on grid snap with this little toggle down here. Another point to notice is that the axonometric grid is matching our existing base angles. Let's turn the cursor so you can see that, which will then also match the cursor, of course. And I'm going to select this particular item and use the grab handle, which is on the grid, and move this item. I can pull it down, still using the grid snap, and relocate that item. Okay, let's zoom into an area over here now. And I'm going to draw an axonometric rectangle on the top face. And you'll be able to see that it's tracking to the grid. Now I'm going to go into Auto Face down here by Grid Snap, which is a tool we had in a previous releases. And I can continue to use the Grid Snap and sketch in the other faces, all the while snapping to the grid. The Grid Snap is active during use of the control points. I'll show you here. You can see as I move this control point that we are snapping to the grid. Okay, now let's look at orthographic. And we'll go into the same setup. And I'm going to set my tick distances to be the same as they were for axonometric, and set my grid type to line, the new choice. Close that, activate the grid. And you can see it change to orthographic. And let's get our cursor back. There we go. And it's the same thing with this grid, that what I draw snaps to the grid. And even as I move and adjust these items, they will continue to snap to the grid as long as grid snap is on. It is possible to change your grid snap from on to off or off to on in the middle of an edit. So you start the edit and select your grab handle. Pull it down, and then while you're still holding down the mouse button, go down, release, click on grid snap, hold down the mouse button before leaving that gray area, come back up into the drawing area, and finish your edit. Alright, now for the new crosshatch item in TI-14. I'll go ahead and select the crosshatching down here, and I do have highlighting shut off. If I right mouse click, at the bottom of the context menu is Edit Crosshatch. I choose that, and it brings up my menu showing all the current settings for the crosshatch that's selected. I can change the pattern type from brick to steel or whatever I choose. And when I hit apply, I will see the changes immediately. And let's go change the scale. Change that to 4, apply. You see that change. Let's change the angle and apply. Everything stays selected even after you hit apply, and that's why I don't have to go back out and reselect it. You can even change the layer it's on, or you can add a border to the crosshatch and choose a color for the border so that it shows up better. And if I come out here and unselect things, you can see it a little bit better. You do not have to hit the apply after each change. You can change multiple things and then just hit the apply once to update everything all at the same time, but this allows you to see the individual changes and see if you like them by doing it after each one. Two other tools that have been added in TI to toolbars are color fill, that has been surfaced to the utilities toolbar, this little paint bucket, and then again on the 3D construction toolbar we have the create planar surface, which is basically a boundary version of the color fill. So by clicking on that, I can go around this boundary, which is made up of a bunch of different items. It's not a closed loop, so I do have to trace it. And that's what makes this tool so handy. The result then is the color filled item. The other tool over here under utilities, the color fill, and it's an item based tool. So if I have an item selected that is already a closed loop and I click on the paint bucket, it fills that particular item. I have some other items over here that I want to fill. So we'll select the paint bucket, and then we'll select the items, and it fills. Here's a single item. We select it, hit the paint bucket, and it fills. Now back over here on the first two items, both of them, they're the edge of this piece of angled metal. And in the case of this type of item, you want to be sure the end is capped so that if you are working in a true 3D model, or if you're wanting to do an extrude with HLR on these, either one of these tools will provide the surface that is needed to honor that edge and show it correctly. I'll go ahead and demonstrate this here by extruding with HLR. Hit apply. and extrude these items over a little bit. There we go. We'll delete the original items and change this so that it's on a layer we can see a little easier. So the result in both cases then is that the surface is respected so you don't get extra lines throughout this area. So again, these are two functionalities that we've put on toolbars to make them easier to access for you. Another tool that I want to point out that we've rearranged from previous versions of TI is our rasterized drawing tool. Originally here under Utilities. It's now also under the File menu as Export Raster. And while we're here, I want to show you a new option with the TIFF export. It's one that we've added back in, and it's a type gray that will allow you to save color raster files as grayscale. So I'll go ahead and save this. And I'm going to accept all the defaults here. Say OK. And now that it's saved, I'll open up the TIFF file so you can preview it. And I'm just looking at this in Windows Picture and Fax Viewer. OK. We'll close that. And now I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to save it directly to JPEG this time. And we'll save it as a full color. Say OK. And again, I'll go open the JPEG and zoom in a little bit so you can see how that came out. Looks pretty good. Alright, so again, it's under File, Export Raster, which probably makes a little more sense to some of our users. Alright, we have a new option under the Options Properties menu, and that is this Autosave tab. It allows for automatically saving your work every however many minutes you specify. You do need to have the box check marked. You can set the minutes, and you can also set which folder your work will be saved into. The work will be saved under the working name of the drawing, so in this case it will be called 9 export as raster.dg in my work folder every 10 minutes. The reason we implemented this is that Release 14 does not have the crash recovery file that we formerly used in previous versions. So if you do have an issue with your drawings, this would be the location to come back to recover your work. In this next video clip, we're going to demonstrate our new redo functionality. This drawing that I've already loaded up is set to go with lots of undos and redos, so I can show this to you. And we'll start with the redo. I had moved a bunch of items, and so now we're going to show them moving back to where they were before I put them into place. And we'll display the whole drawing here so you can see everything. And you can see here that we've run out of redos. We've done all we can. So now I'll go and do the undos. Move everything back together. And back to the redos. So let's say now I want to come in and delete some items. So I'll select a few things and get rid of them. And now we can go do the undos. and the redos. And get back to where everything was deleted again until that runs out. So you can see that the undo and redo buffer is pretty nice, and it is unlimited, so we think you'll find this to be a nice feature, useful in your everyday work. Alright, next we're going to talk about the Autospins setup under the Options menu and the Autospins themselves. These are basically the same point input modes as you have on your point toolbar. They're automatically activated either from the right Alt key, or you can turn Autospins on. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Autospins. And okay, this menu. Oh, my tolerance is set to 10. That's basically just the region around the cursor where the Autospins will hit on. So let's okay this. And I'm just going to go to the line tool, and I'll enter a point, and as you can see, the horizontal automatically came up for me, so I'll click. If I come down here, you can see vertical. If I come over here, we see a line snap or a midpoint to the segment. I'll do another vertical and another horizontal after this. There we go. And let's come back here and look for an, do this and come over here and look for an endpoint. And here's an intersection also. Alright, I'm going to put a circle over here, and let's clean up some of the things in here, get rid of them. Another place this comes into play is when suddenly your control points can find a segment mid and snap to it. So you now have your spims available from your control points as well. Here's a tangent, or I can grab this and snap to it, and so on. Endpoint, line. Even with the relimit tool, these will work. I can relimit this and snap to the line, relimit that and snap to the endpoint of this line. Let's draw a circle down here. And let's say you want to find the center point of your circle. It will show you that. Just very handy tools right there at your fingertips without having to do extra button clicks if you don't want to. Now if we come up and shut the Autospins off, okay, and then come back down here, you'll see that they are not activated. They will only be activated if I hit the right Alt key. So holding down my right Alt key, then it will find them again. It will do the Autospins for me. Here's a tangent, an endpoint. Again, I'm having to hold down my right Alt key because the Autospins are currently turned off. The right Alt key is more of an on-demand kind of feature. So maybe you don't want them all the time, just every now and then. So Options, Autospin. Another one of TI-14's capabilities is the ability to drag and drop other file formats directly into TI other than our DG and DX, which we've had before. Here I have a Microsoft window listing my files, DWG, JPEG, CGM, and TIFF. And I can just grab one of these, bring it over to the TI window, and pop it in. Here's my CGM file. Now the options that get used with these on-the-fly conversions are the options that were last used when you brought in one of these file formats. You can look those up by going to File, Open, and then choosing your file format, and on the options line it will show you what options are being used to convert those files. That's what gets used for these on-the-fly conversions. Here they all are, all my different drawings. So again, we're reducing the amount of menus that you have to navigate through to bring in your drawings. With the OpenGL architecture in TI-14, we've been able to add some visualization tools. Two of them are on the 3D View toolbar and are Visualize HLR and Visualize Shader. We've also added another tool over here called Z-Buffer, and Z-Buffer basically displays the drawing based on Z-depth value instead of drawing order. I'll demonstrate this one in a little bit. Right now, let's start out with this 3D model. It was originally an IGES file, and we'll rotate it. This is a typical TI view that you would have today if you did load an IGES model with your tessellations turned on. And it would just be this one blob of closed polygons like you see here. So let's go ahead and use one of these new tools, Visualize HLR. And with that, it takes those surface tessellations and shows an outline of the tessellations and then shows the surface between the tessellations. Now the color of this drawing is a light gray and unfortunately doesn't display very well. So let's go ahead and turn on the Visualize Shader and we'll get a shaded view of this control arm. Now you can run this through the 3D Control Hidden Line Removal and get a piece of line art out of this particular model. And this is something you could do in the past versions of TI as well. You just didn't have this visual. Okay, let's close this drawing now. And this is another small 3D model that I'll use to show some of the Z-Buffer. This is a typical view of this tool. And I'll go ahead and give the edges of the closed polygon a color so we can see it a little bit better. Notice how the model itself looks distorted, and that's typical of the TI view of this model because it's in drawing display order instead of displaying it based on its Z-depth. And that's where the Z-Buffer comes in. So let's turn that on. And you can see that the model displays as it should now. I've got my y-axis locked here, and we can rotate and display the model and show it off. Now let's toggle the Visualize HLR tool on, and you get a little bit better view of this one. And again, dynamically, when we go to rotate it, the hidden line removal is happening to this as you are rotating it around. And then we'll switch to the Visualize with Shader and again rotate it around. Now this particular model was just a surface model built in TI using the extrude tools and closed polygon fill tools. Again, you could run HLR against it and get your line art from it. Our next enhancement is for all of our macro writers out there. We have added modalless HTML forms to the macro user interface. This enables the macro form, or UI, to remain persistent during and after the running of a macro. This is an example of a user-defined macro that generates filleted rectangles. You'll see on the form that there are options for fillet radius, masking and layer of mask. Another thing you'll notice with this is that after the macro has completed, other tools within TI are available without closing the form. Changes to the form do become effective as soon as the change is made. In our next example, we are going to show the use of a modal-less form with the new persistent item selection. The persistent item selection set allows items and groups to remain selected even after an ungroup operation or a modal change. In this example, we are selecting some text and changing modals of height and font. Notice that the text remains selected after the operation is complete. Now we will demonstrate how this will be useful with groups. You can take a group of items and they will remain selected, and you can add to them easily. We have our group down at the bottom with the text and the rectangle. And now we are adding some other items up at the top, just independent of our below group. We select our group, ungroup it, everything remains selected. We come to the top and add these items to our selection set. And now we can group everything. This is also nice if we want to remove individual components from the group. For more detailed descriptions and usage of these enhancements, please refer to the TI User's Reference. For additional questions, please contact our help desk to open a service call at helpdesk@autotrol.com or our toll-free number 1-800-233-2882, option 1,